Okay, so get this, right? Like when you stub your toe and your body freaks out.
Yeah.
We're talking about multiplying that by like 1,000,000?
Uh-huh.
That's what we're going to be diving into today, like how your body reacts to major illness or injury.
It's incredible, really.
Yeah.
The human body just has this primal survival mode that
Yes,
kicks
they
in when things go seriously wrong.
And we're not talking just a sniffle. We're going deep into the ICU
That's right.
to understand how nutrition can literally be a lifesaver
Yeah.
in these critical situations.
Hmm.
Think of it like this. You're in a metabolic freefall,
Yeah.
and nutrition is the parachute.
Exactly. And to kind of help you visualize this, let's consider a patient, we'll call her Franny, a 70-year-old woman admitted with multiple spine fractures
Oh, wow.
and developing sepsis. Her case really highlights
Oof.
some of the challenges that we're going to unpack.
So in this deep dive, we're really going on a journey to understand this stress response.
Mm.
Basically how your body uses energy when it's under extreme duress, and how doctors actually use nutrition support to really tip the scales towards recovery.
It's all about understanding how the body prioritizes its resources in a crisis.
Right.
Imagine your body has this alarm system,
Uh-huh.
and when it senses danger, that alarm goes off,
Right.
shifting everything into survival mode. This is the stress response.
So it's like the body's saying, hold everything.
Yeah.
We've got a major situation here.
And this survival mode has two phases,
Okay.
the ebb phase and the flow phase.
Yeah.
The ebb phase is like the initial shock. I think low blood flow,
Right.
conserving energy, a
Yeah.
bit like hitting the brakes.
Yeah.
And that usually lasts for the first 24 to 48 hours.
So the body's assessing the damage,
Precisely.
and figuring out its next move.
Then comes the flow phase,
Yeah.
where things get really wild.
Okay.
The body shifts into this
Yeah.
hypermetabolism, burning through calories like crazy, more like slamming on the gas.
But it's not just burning calories for energy.
Right.
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 You got it. It starts breaking down its own tissues,
What?
muscle, fat, to release nutrients needed for immediate repairs.
Wow.
Think of it as the body using whatever it can to keep the lights on.
So the body's almost cannibalizing itself to survive.
In the short term, it's a necessary evil.
Right.
But if this flow phase continues unchecked, it can lead to muscle wasting
Right.
and a cascade of other problems.
So it's a delicate dance between short-term survival
Yeah.
and the potential for long-term damage.
That's why understanding the nuances of the stress response is so crucial.
Right.
It's not just about throwing calories at the problem.
Right.
It's about providing the right nutrients at the right time to support healing.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about the puppet masters.
Yeah.
Behind this whole roller coaster, the hormones, what's going on at a molecular level?
Ah, yes. The hormones. Think of them as the conductors
Okay.
of this intricate stress response orchestra.
Uh-huh.
You have adrenaline,
Right.
the fight or flight hormone.
Yeah.
Glucagon,
Okay.
which signals the liver to release stored glucose.
Right.
And then there's cortisol, the infamous stress hormone.
Oh, I know cortisol all too well.
Yeah.
That's the reason I can't sleep sometimes.
Exactly.
But what role does it play in this, life or death scenario?
In this context, cortisol helps mobilize energy stores.
Okay.
But here's the catch.
Uh-oh.
When cortisol stays elevated for too long, it can have some pretty negative side effects.
So like stress eating, but on a cellular level? Okay. Well, chronically high cortisol can actually prevent your body from building and repairing tissues effectively.
Oh, wow.
It can also lead to high blood sugar and suppress your immune system, making you more vulnerable to infections.
It's like a double whammy, breaking down muscle
Exactly.
while making it harder to rebuild.
It's a delicate balancing act.
Right.
And that's why nutrition support is so crucial in critical illness.
Right.
We need to provide enough calories and protein
Right.
to counteract the catabolic effects of this stress response.
Okay. Now, on top of all of this, there's inflammation.
Yeah.
I've always heard,
Right.
inflammation is bad.
Yeah.
But is that always the case?
That's a common misconception.
Yeah.
Inflammation is actually crucial for healing. It's like your body sending out an SOS,
Okay.
calling in the troops, the white blood cells and antibodies,
Right?
to fight infection and repair damaged tissues.
But it's like a necessary fire.
A perfect analogy.
You needed to burn away the bad stuff, but not spread out of control.
If the inflammatory response gets out of control, it can damage healthy tissues.
Right.
This is what happens in sepsis,
Right.
a life-threatening complication where the body's immune system goes into overdrive.
This is starting to feel a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
So you've got this intense stress response.
Right.
Hormones are running wild.
Yeah.
Inflammation's raging.
Uh-huh.
Where does malnutrition fit into all of this?
That's a great question. Remember how we talked about the body breaking down its own tissues for energy?
Yeah.
Well, combine that with the increased metabolic demands of the stress response,
Right.
and the body's nutrient reserves can get depleted pretty quickly.
So it's like your body's running on fumes,
Yeah.
your gas tank is practically empty.
And the real danger is that malnutrition itself
Uh-huh.
can worsen outcomes.
Right.
It creates this vicious cycle. It impairs wound healing, weakens the immune system,
Right.
and increases the risk of complications.
So you're telling me that someone who is already seriously ill
Yes,
or injured is at high risk of becoming malnourished,
exactly.
which then makes their situation even worse.
It's a hidden danger,
Right.
and it's much more common than people think.
Wow.
Studies suggest that up to 78% of ICU patients may be malnourished.
78%. That's a staggering number.
Absolutely.
And I bet it's not always obvious just by looking at someone.
That's why early nutrition screening is critical.
Right.
We need to identify patients at risk and intervene early
Yeah.
to prevent or minimize the negative consequences of malnutrition.
So let's talk solutions. How do doctors actually address this nutritional crisis
Yeah.
in critically ill patients? Is it as simple as just like making sure they get enough calories?
It's definitely more nuanced
Okay.
than just calories.
Okay.
The goal of nutrition support in this setting
Yeah.
is to minimize catabolism,
Uh-huh.
promote healing, and modulate the stress response. We're giving the body the building blocks it needs to repair and recover.
And this isn't always about like regular meals, right?
You're right.
I've heard of, things like tube feeding and IV nutrition.
Enteral nutrition,
Yeah.
or tube feeding,
Right.
delivers liquid nutrition directly into the stomach or small intestine through a tube.
Okay.
And then there's parenteral nutrition, or IV nutrition,
Right.
which bypasses the digestive system altogether, delivering nutrients directly into the bloodstream.
Okay. So when would you choose one over the other? It seems like IV nutrition would be the most straightforward way
Yeah.
to ensure someone gets, all the nutrients they need.
While parenteral nutrition can be a lifesaver,
Right.
in certain cases, whenever possible, we prefer enteral nutrition.
Why is that? What's so special about the gut?
Keeping the gut working, even when someone isn't eating normally,
Right.
has huge benefits.
Okay.
It maintains the gut lining's integrity, which acts as a barrier against bacteria
Yeah.
and other harmful substances.
Right.
It also helps preserve the gut microbiome,
Okay.
those trillions of bacteria
Yeah.
that live in our intestines, which are crucial for digestion and immune function.
So it's like keeping the engine running even if the car is parked.
That's a great way to put it.
You don't want things to seize up.
A healthy gut is crucial for overall health, even when someone is critically ill.
Right.
And enteral nutrition helps to maintain that.
This makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So bringing it back to Franny, our 70-year-old patient with the spine fractures and sepsis.
Right.
How would you approach her nutritional needs?
Well, since Franny's digestive system is still functioning, we would choose enteral nutrition for her. First, we'd need to calculate her calorie and protein needs considering her age, her weight, her height, her activity level,
Wow, okay.
and the severity of her illness.
So there's a lot of math involved.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not a one-size-fits-all.
Definitely not. Every patient is unique, and their needs can change daily.
Right.
We also have to consider the route of administration.
Okay.
For Franny, we'd likely choose a nasoduodenal feeding tube, which goes through the nose into the small intestine.
And why bypass the stomach and go directly into the small intestine?
It reduces the risk of aspiration,
Okay.
which is when food or liquid gets into the lungs.
Oh, wow.
This is especially important for critically ill patients.
Makes sense.
And what about the actual food going through the tube?
Yeah?
Is it just like a blended up regular meal? Not quite. There are different types of enteral formulas designed for various needs. Some are standard formulas that contain protein, carbohydrates, and fats.
Oh, that covers the basics.
Then there are specialty formulas.
Okay.
Tailored for specific conditions like diabetes,
Right.
liver disease, or kidney problems.
It's all about choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly.
You wouldn't use a hammer to screw in a light bulb.
In Franny's case, we'd likely start with a standard formula
Right.
and adjust it based on her individual needs and how she responds.
Right.
We'll be monitoring her closely for any signs of complications, such as intolerance to the feeding or electrolyte imbalances.
This is incredibly insightful.
Yeah.
I'm beginning to understand, the level of care and expertise involved in providing nutrition support for critically ill patients.
It truly is.
It's not just about the calories. It's about the science of healing and recovery.
And as we've seen with Franny's case, it requires a deep understanding of the body's physiology,
Right.
the intricacies of different nutrients.
And constant monitoring and adjustment.
Well, before we get too deep into the weeds here, let's take a pause here for now. We'll be back in the next part of our deep dive to explore more about calorie and protein needs, the role of micronutrients, and some potential complications that can arise during nutrition support.
Sounds good. Welcome back to our deep dive into nutrition and critical illness.
We've been talking about how doctors use enteral and parenteral nutrition to help patients like Franny, recover.
That's right. And we were just getting into the specifics of how those formulas are chosen and adjusted to fit each patient's needs.
I have to admit something. When I hear about critically ill patients, needing nutrition support, my first thought is always more is better,
It makes sense. Many people just assume that loading up on calories
Yeah,
will speed up healing.
exactly. Like pile on the calories to fuel the recovery, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I have a feeling it's not that simple. You're right. When it comes to critical illness, it's not just about maximizing calories. There's actually growing evidence that something called permissive underfeeding can be beneficial in the early stages.
Permissive underfeeding. So you're intentionally giving someone fewer calories than they might need. Why would you do that when they're, already in a fragile state?
Think back to the stress response we discussed earlier.
Right.
The body goes into this hypermetabolic state,
Right.
burning through calories rapidly.
Okay.
Some experts believe that overfeeding during this phase could actually worsen that metabolic stress and lead to complications.
So it's like adding fuel to the fire when what you really need is to calm things down.
Exactly. By slightly reducing calories, we might be able to help the body regain its metabolic balance.
This is completely changing my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a counterintuitive approach to healing.
It is. But it's important to remember that we're not starving our patients. We're still providing essential nutrients.
Yeah.
Just in a more controlled and strategic way.
Okay, so it's not just about, blindly pumping in calories. If calories aren't the main focus, what are you prioritizing when it comes to nutrition for someone like Franny?
Protein. Remember how we talked about protein being crucial for wound healing, immune function, and maintaining muscle mass?
Yeah, it's like the building block of recovery.
Exactly. And in critical illness, protein becomes even more crucial. Think of it as the construction material needed to repair the damage caused by the stress response.
So in this context, protein is even more important than calories.
Absolutely. It's about providing the building blocks for repair, not just the fuel for energy.
And what about all the other stuff, the vitamins, the minerals, the antioxidants? Do those still matter when someone's critically ill?
They do. Micronutrients are essential for supporting various bodily functions, from immune response to wound healing, and those needs can be even higher during critical illness.
So it's not just about hitting your macros, it's about the micros too.
That's right. For example, vitamin C is crucial for collagen synthesis, which is essential for wound healing. Zinc supports immune function and cell growth, and selenium plays a role in antioxidant defense.
This makes me think about all those immunity-boosting drinks and supplements out there. Can you really boost your immune system just by, chugging down a bunch of vitamins?
That's a good question. While certain vitamins and minerals are essential for a healthy immune system, there's no evidence that megadoses will, magically prevent illness.
So it's more about making sure you're not deficient rather than trying to supercharge your system.
Exactly. For a healthy person eating a balanced diet, extra vitamins and minerals likely won't provide much benefit. But in critical illness, where nutrient needs are higher and absorption might be impaired, targeted micronutrient supplementation can be a vital part of recovery.
I'm learning so much about, the complexities of nutrition and critical care. It's amazing how much we know, but it seems like there's still so much more to learn.
Yeah, you're right. It's a constantly evolving field. Researchers are always working to refine our understanding of optimal nutrition strategies for different patients.
So we've covered the importance of protein, the nuances of calorie management, and the role of micronutrients. Are there any potential risks or complications with nutrition support itself?
That's an important question. While nutrition support is generally safe and well tolerated, there are a few things to keep in mind. One potential complication is refeeding syndrome.
Refeeding syndrome. That sounds a little scary. What exactly is it?
It's a potentially dangerous metabolic problem that can happen when we reintroduce nutrition too quickly after a period of starvation or severe malnutrition.
So you're saying even feeding someone can be risky in certain situations.
It may seem counterintuitive, but it's true.
Wow.
After prolonged starvation, the body adapts to a low nutrient intake. Suddenly flooding the system with carbohydrates and other nutrients can overwhelm the body, triggering a cascade of metabolic shifts.
Okay, so what kind of metabolic shifts are we talking about?
One key change is a rapid shift in electrolytes, especially phosphorus, potassium, and magnesium. These electrolytes move from the bloodstream into the cells, which can lead to dangerously low levels in the blood.
And why is that a problem?
Electrolytes are crucial for many bodily functions, from muscle contractions to nerve signaling. When their levels are out of balance, it can lead to serious complications, like heart arrhythmias, respiratory failure, seizures, and even coma.
Wow, that is serious. How do you prevent refeeding syndrome from happening?
The key is to start nutrition supports slowly
Okay.
and gradually increase the amount
Okay.
and complexity of nutrients over time. This gives the body a chance to adjust.
Right.
We also monitor electrolyte levels closely and provide supplements as needed.
So it's a bit like easing someone back into eating after they've had like a stomach bug. You don't want to immediately go for a huge meal.
That's a good analogy. Gradual transitions are essential. This is just one example of the many factors that need careful consideration when providing safe and effective nutrition support for critically ill patients.
This whole discussion has really opened my eyes to how specialized this area is. It's not something you can just pick up overnight.
You're absolutely right. It requires specialized knowledge,
Right.
careful monitoring, and a willingness to adapt to each patient's individual needs and challenges.
I'm learning so much from this deep dive. It's incredible how much goes into something that seems, as basic as feeding someone when they're sick.
I agree. It's a fascinating and complex field. And there's still so much we're learning about how to optimize nutrition to improve outcomes for our patients.
We'll delve further into this topic in the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into nutrition and critical illness.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking about the body's response to severe illness and how nutrition is so important for recovery.
Yeah. We've discussed how the body's survival mechanisms can sometimes backfire and lead to things like malnutrition. And we've seen that giving nutrition isn't just about, giving as many calories as possible.
Exactly. It's really about finding that right balance, right, of
Yeah.
nutrients to support healing without overwhelming the body. And we also discussed how enteral nutrition or tube feeding is generally preferred over IV feeding because it helps maintain gut health, which is so important.
Right. And now let's circle back to Franny, our 70-year-old patient with the spine fractures and sepsis. Let's say her condition is improving and she's been getting enteral nutrition. What's next for her? How do you actually transition her back to a regular diet?
Yeah, that's a great question. I imagine it's not as simple as, just handing her a plate of food and saying, bon appetit.
You're right. As Franny's condition stabilizes and the inflammation starts to calm down, her appetite should start to return naturally.
So she'll start, feeling hungry again.
Exactly. And that's actually a good sign. It means her body's shifting out of that hypermetabolic state, the one where it's just burning through everything, and into the anabolic phase where it's focused on rebuilding and repairing tissues.
So it's like her body's saying, okay, the worst is over, time to start patching things up.
Precisely. And at this point, we would start to slowly transition Franny back to eating, normal food. This usually involves a step-by-step approach.
Okay. So what does that actually look like?
We might start with clear liquids, then progress to soft foods, and then eventually she can go back to a regular diet as tolerated. It's all about easing her digestive system back into action.
That makes sense. It's kind of like when you're weaning a baby off formula and introducing solid foods. You don't want to overwhelm their system.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
We want to make sure Franny's digestive system can handle the change and that she's getting enough calories and protein to continue healing.
And I'm guessing you're monitoring her pretty closely during this whole transition.
Absolutely. We keep an eye on her intake, her weight, and any signs of, any problems with her digestion, like nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea. We also continue to check her blood work to make sure her electrolyte levels are stable and that she's not missing any important nutrients.
So it really takes a team, to support a patient through critical illness and recovery. Doctors, nurses, dietitians, everyone's got to be on the same page.
You're absolutely right. It's a collaborative effort. And nutrition is an essential piece of that puzzle.
So let's fast forward a bit. Franny's doing well, she's eating, and she's ready to go home. What kind of advice would you give her about nutrition, for the long term?
We would definitely emphasize the importance of eating a really nutrient-rich diet, one that's high in both protein and calories, just to make sure she has the energy and the building blocks to fully recover. We also encourage her to listen to her body, when she's hungry, when she's full, and to eat regularly throughout the day to make sure she's getting enough.
So no need to go back to, restrictive diets or counting every calorie?
Not at all. This is the time to really focus on nourishing her body and giving it everything it needs to heal.
What about exercise? When can she start being more active?
As Franny gets stronger, we'd encourage her to slowly start being more active as she can handle it. This could be, things like walking, stretching, or maybe some chair yoga. Exercise is really important for strength, mobility, and just overall well-being.
So it sounds like a holistic approach is key, right? Nutrition, exercise, lifestyle changes, it all adds up.
Exactly. And we'd also make sure Franny has access to ongoing support. Things like follow-up appointments with her doctor and dietitian, maybe even support groups or other resources that can help her stay on track with her health.
This deep dive has been really eye-opening. I feel like I have a much better understanding of how complex nutrition is, not just when you're sick, but for everyone. It's so important for our health and well-being.
It's been great sharing this information with you, and I hope our listeners are walking away with some new knowledge about how to make healthy choices.
Absolutely. It's easy to, get caught up in the latest fad diet or develop an unhealthy relationship with food. But at the end of the day, food is fuel. It's nourishment, and it's a big part of healing and thriving.
I completely agree. Food should be something we enjoy, and that nourishes us, right?
So to wrap things up, let's raise a glass of a nutrient-rich smoothie, of course, to Franny and everyone else on the road to recovery.
Cheers to that. And to taking care of ourselves
through
the power of good nutrition.
This has been The Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well-informed. We'll see you next time for another fascinating journey into the world of knowledge.